When the judge ordered Maya Rollins to stand for sentencing, no one questioned it. Not the bailiff, not the prosecutor, not even the people in the gallery. But as the disabled veteran struggled to rise on her prosthetic leg and collapsed, the courtroom went silent. Then her bronze star slipped from her coat, and everything changed. Why did it take her falling for the world to finally see who she was? If that question makes you pause like this video and share it with someone who still believes in dignity. Now let's go back just one day before it all unfolded. The clip was only 37 seconds long. No music, no narration, just the harsh fluorescent lights of a county courtroom, a woman in a dark coat and the sound of a metal crutch striking the tile as she tried to stand. She didn't get far. Her body trembled. Her left leg gave out and she crumpled to the ground like a house folding in a storm. A circular object rolled from her coat, spinning gently across the floor until it stopped at the judge's feet. Someone gasped, and then the courtroom fell silent. That video had already reached over 8 million views. But before the silence, before the fall, before the entire room realized who Maya Rollins really was, there was just another Tuesday. It was cold, but not the kind of cold that stings. It was the kind that makes everything feel still. Maya stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing out a coffee mug with one hand, her prosthetic foot clicking softly on the linoleum floor as she shifted her weight. Behind her, her mother sat in the recliner by the window, too weak to hold her tea, the tremors in her fingers making even a blanket feel like a battle. Danielle was in the hallway tying her scrubs. She glanced at the clock on the microwave and sighed like she always did when she was late for her shift. Then she turned to her sister and said what she had said too many mornings before. "Why don't you just let them know who you are?" Maya didn't answer right away. She wiped her hands on the dish towel, then walked over and adjusted the blanket around their mother's legs. Only when she was sure their mother wouldn't hear did she speak, and even then her voice was barely above a whisper. Because it shouldn't matter. Danielle leaned against the wall, arms folded, her eyes tracing the shape of her sister's jawline, the tension behind it. "But it does, Maya. It always has. People don't listen unless you make them." Maya didn't respond. She bent to pick up the envelope on the counter instead, the one with the seal from the municipal court. It was her third citation for improper parking in a restricted zone. The last time she'd written a letter explaining the circumstances. There had been no reply. Danielle saw it too. They're pushing you. They're treating you like you're just lazy or irresponsible. You shouldn't have to answer for driving our mom to the ER. Maya folded the letter and slipped it into her coat pocket. The same coat she wore during her final deployment overseas. It was plain olive green, nothing remarkable to look at except for the stitching on the inside where a bronze star had been hand-sewn into the lining right beneath the heart. "I'm going alone," she said quietly. "It's just a hearing." Danielle straightened. "You're not even taking a lawyer." "I don't need one," Maya replied, reaching for her crutches. "They'll read the fine, I'll pay it, and that's that." The room felt heavier now, like the air had thickened. Danielle stepped closer, softer now, like the next words might break something fragile. "You've never wanted anyone to see what you've carried, but they're not giving you a choice anymore." Maya looked up, then her eyes steady, not angry, just tired. She had seen too much in deserts and tents and helicopters to be shaken by bureaucracy. But there was a weight behind her stillness, the kind only carried by those who've walked through fire and never asked to be thanked for it. She looked over at their mother. The old woman was already half asleep again, her chest rising and falling like slow tides. Maya adjusted the blanket one more time, then headed for the door. Danielle followed her to the porch. It was quiet outside the street, still damp from the night's rain. As Maya reached the first step, Danielle called after her. "Maya." Her sister paused, not turning back. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." Maya waited a breath, then spoke without looking over her shoulder. "I know, but some things you still stand for." And then she was gone. 24 hours later, that same woman would try to stand again, this time in front of a judge who saw only another name on a docket. But the world wouldn't stay blind for long. The courthouse looked like it always had tired walls, buzzing lights, benches that groaned under the weight of too many stories no one really wanted to hear. Maya arrived 10 minutes early. She didn't rush. She never did. Each step on her prosthetic was measured steady, the quiet tap of her crutch echoing against the tiled hallway as if announcing her presence in a language only she understood. She was dressed simply. Nothing about her appearance said she had anything to prove. Long coat buttoned to the top, dark pants, clean shoes, and the soft rhythm of discipline in how she carried herself. Not proud, not afraid, just composed. Controlled. Like someone who'd learned the hard way that emotion was a luxury best saved for safer places. When she entered the courtroom, the few people already seated barely looked up. Most were waiting on their own cases, some staring blankly at the floor, others scrolling through phones with the indifference of habit. There was no reason anyone would see her as anything more than a woman with a parking violation and a limp. Deputy Rourke stood by the double doors, arms crossed over his chest, watching as Maya approached the front of the room. His uniform fit a little too tightly around the shoulders. His jaw was square but tired. You could tell by the way he shifted his weight that he'd once been military, maybe years ago. But whatever pride had once filled him had settled into resignation. His eyes followed her without recognition. Just another name, another file, another early morning he didn't want to be there for. He gestured for her to sit. At the far end of the room, behind the high bench where justice was supposed to live, Judge Elena Brooks reviewed a thick stack of papers. She didn't look up as Maya entered. She didn't need to. She had seen the file already. Elena Brooks had made her name 2 decades earlier as a no-nonsense prosecutor who never smiled in court and rarely lost. She was the kind of judge who believed order was sacred and that the law worked best when it wasn't softened. After an early retirement due to health, she had recently returned on special assignment to help clear a backlog of minor cases, civil violations, housing disputes, traffic fines. Her tone, it was said, could quiet a room faster than a gavel. She finally looked up, adjusted her glasses, and spoke in a tone as flat as the walls around them. Maya Rollins, you've been cited for repeat violations of Municipal Code 34B, unauthorized parking in a restricted medical zone. 3 incidents in under 2 months. No formal response filed, no payment made, no appeal submitted. Maya cleared her throat gently. Her voice was calm, low, the kind of voice people often had to lean in to hear, not because it was weak, but because it refused to shout. I was transporting my mother to urgent care. The hospital loading zones were full. She couldn't walk on her own. I didn't have time to move the car. Elena didn't flinch. She looked back down at the papers, then continued as if Maya hadn't spoken at all. Records indicate you were issued citations on April 2nd, May 14th, and June 3rd. In each instance, your vehicle was parked in clearly marked emergency access zones. These are violations of public safety protocol. Maya didn't argue. She just looked at the judge, her eyes steady, not defensive. There was no shame there, no anger either. Only the kind of quiet certainty that made people uncomfortable when they were expecting something messier. Danielle sat in the back row, hands clenched together in her lap. She hated this room already. Hated how it made people like her sister small, how it shrank the years of service, the sleepless nights, the scar tissue, until all that was left was a line on a docket. Judge Brooks exhaled, then finally addressed Maya directly. Miss Rollins. The court has little patience for repeat offenders who believe personal circumstances exempt them from basic civic responsibility. I've heard this excuse before, many times. Maya opened her mouth, trying once more not to defend herself, but to clarify. My mother was, but Elena held up a hand, not sharply, just firmly enough to cut the air. You're not different from the rest, she said, and there was something in her tone that made the room feel colder than it had a moment ago. Everyone has a reason. Everyone thinks theirs is urgent. The law doesn't ask why. It asks if. Danielle's jaw tightened. Even Rourke shifted slightly where he stood. Elena set her pen down and adjusted the file in front of her. Stand for sentencing. The words landed not like a command, but like a test. Maya didn't move right away. Not out of defiance, but because she was still trying to process the weight of how ordinary the moment had been made to feel. This wasn't war. This wasn't crisis. This was a court in a quiet town on a Tuesday morning, and somehow she had never felt more unseen. She placed her hands on the bench to steady herself, and then she began to rise. The room was still eerily so. The type of silence that doesn't come from order, but from collective disbelief. You could almost hear people holding their breath as Maya Rollins, one hand on her cane, the other braced against the bench, tried to do what the judge had ordered, stand. She knew this courtroom didn't understand what that meant for someone like her. It wasn't just about balance or effort. It was about nerve endings that no longer responded, about phantom pain that struck without warning, about pride that would not let her ask for help. Judge Elena Brooks stared down, her eyes unreadable. The gavel hadn't moved. No one offered a hand. Maya exhaled, slow and shaky. Then she shifted her weight. The prosthetic leg wobbled, subtle at first, but enough to send a ripple of doubt up her spine. For one suspended second, she stood. Then the world tilted. There was no scream, no cry for help, just a dull, gut-hitting thud as her body crashed to the cold tile floor. Her cane clattered beside her. But what captured the room's attention wasn't the fall. It was the gleam of something metallic that slid from the inside of her coat. It spun once, then twice before landing face up just beyond her outstretched hand. A bronze star medal. Time stuttered. From the gallery, a gasp. Chairs scraped. A man dropped the pen he'd been fiddling with. Even the bailiff, Deputy Rourke, blinked and stepped forward, though he didn't reach her. Maya Danielle's voice cracked through the stillness like lightning. She ran down the aisle, heels, forgotten knees slamming against the floor as she reached her sister. Oh God. Maya, talk to me. Are you okay? Maya winced but forced a breath. Yeah, just give me a second. Danielle wrapped an arm around her shoulder. You shouldn't have come alone. You shouldn't have stood. Why didn't you tell them? Maya didn't answer. Her eyes, cloudy but calm, rested on the judge's face. And for the first time, Judge Elena Brooks didn't look in control. Her gaze had dropped to the bronze star. Her jaw twitched. Her pen slipped from her fingers, hitting the bench with a hollow click. A murmur rose from the gallery. Is that real? She's a veteran. Bronze star. She has one leg. Jenna Lewis, sitting quietly in the back with her laptop open, fumbled for her phone. A law student at the university, she'd only come to observe a minor municipal hearing. But now she hit record, then go live. She whispered to herself, who is she? The stream began, dozens watching, then hundreds, then more. Inside the courtroom, Danielle helped Maya sit up. The older woman's breath came in short bursts, her left shoulder twitching from the shock of the fall. Don't move, Danielle said, holding tighter. Just breathe. Let me hold you. But Maya shook her head gently. I'm all right, She glanced toward the medal still lying on the floor like a truth too loud to ignore. Judge Elena finally spoke, her voice rasping. Do you require medical assistance, Ms. Rollins? Maya looked up. No, Your Honor, just time. There was no arrogance in her tone, no plea for sympathy, only a calm resolve. Like she had learned long ago that dignity wasn't something anyone could give her. It had to be kept even when everything else was taken away. Judge Elena cleared her throat again but said nothing more. Danielle stood slowly, her arm around her sister's shoulders. She addressed the judge directly. She carried our mother to the hospital in the middle of the night. That's why she ran those red lights. That's why she's here. She's not some criminal. She's a soldier. And then, almost as if summoned by truth, the entire courtroom shifted. The gallery leaned forward. Some mouths hung open. Others pressed hands to their chests. Even Rourke, the deputy who had been stone-faced from the beginning, lowered his head slightly, eyes fixed on the medal at Maya's feet. And that medal, small, circular, weightless in appearance, now felt like the heaviest object in the room. Judge Elena looked like someone trying to remember how to breathe properly. Her gavel remained untouched. Her authority for the first time felt uncertain. Jenna's livestream flashed with comments. Who is she? That judge better apologize. She's a damn hero. Back inside, Maya adjusted her jacket and began to sit up straighter. With Danielle's help, she lifted herself back onto the bench, slow but steady. She didn't look at anyone, only at the spot on the floor where the bronze star still lay. Danielle picked it up quietly and pressed it into her sister's palm. Maya closed her fingers around it. And the room, though silent, felt like it had just heard something loud and undeniable. The woman they had almost sentenced without thought had just told them everything without saying a word. And the courtroom would never forget it. For a long moment, no one moved. It felt as though the entire courtroom had slipped into another dimension where time didn't pass and words had no place. Just breath. Just weight. Just silence that pulsed like a drumbeat beneath the skin. Deputy Rourke, who had spent most of the morning looking like he was doing overtime on a job he no longer believed in, stepped forward. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His boots echoed against the polished floor as he crouched slowly beside Maya. He picked up the bronze star from her lap, then looked at it for a second longer than necessary. His thumb brushed against its edge, and something in his eyes, something guarded and hollow before softened like old cloth, left out in the rain. Wordlessly, he placed the medal back into Maya's hand. Not as if returning property, but as if handing something sacred back to its rightful keeper. Their eyes met. For the first time there was no division, no badge, no bench, no battlefield between them. Rourke spoke, his voice rough but steady. "Semper Fi." Maya blinked, surprised. "You served?" she asked quietly. He nodded once. "I did. Long time ago." That was all. He stood and returned to his place near the door, but he no longer stood like a guard. He stood like a witness. A woman in the second row leaned toward the person beside her and whispered, "I know her. That's the medic from Mosul. She pulled my nephew out under fire." Her words didn't travel far. They didn't have to. The shift in the room was already happening. It moved through the wood of the benches into the bones of those watching. It made people sit straighter, breathe slower, as if reverence had settled in without invitation. Maya looked down at the medal in her palm, her fingers curling around it. The weight of it felt different now. Not heavier, not lighter, just final. She whispered to herself, barely loud enough for Danielle to hear. "Just once more, I stand up. For me." Her voice cracked slightly, but not from weakness, from resolve. Danielle, still kneeling beside her, tightened her grip around her sister's shoulder. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," she murmured. "Not this time. Not with me here. I get it now. I finally do." Maya's throat worked around a reply, but she didn't speak. Instead, she exhaled the kind of breath that feels like it's been waiting years to leave the body. Behind them, Jenna Lewis sat frozen, her phone trembling in her grip as the live stream continued. She hadn't planned this. No one had. But she knew what this was now, not just a case, not just a courtroom slip-up. This was something that would travel far beyond these walls. The comment feed exploded. "Wait, she's a vet. She saved lives and the judge treated her like a criminal. Is she okay? Is she still there? Don't end the stream. She's a damn hero, no question." Thousands were watching now. Then tens of thousands. The numbers surged like a rising tide. But inside the room, Maya wasn't watching the views. She was focusing on her breath. 1 beat, 2. Then she shifted in her seat. Slowly, painfully, with Danielle's help, she braced her hands and straightened her spine. She didn't try to stand again, not yet. But she sat like someone who had reclaimed something small, private, and vital. Judge Elena Brooks hadn't said a word. Her gavel still rested by her hand untouched, but her knuckles had turned white where they gripped the edge of the bench. She looked down, not at Maya, but at the floor, as if searching for something that wasn't there anymore, like a sense of control that had quietly slipped away the moment Maya hit the ground. No one in the room moved. The gallery, the clerk, the bailiff, even the attorneys on standby, everyone had frozen in that moment of realization. That this woman, the one they'd nearly judged as careless, irresponsible, another case number, had once saved lives while dragging half her body through sand and blood. That she had come to court not with a lawyer or a press team, but alone. That she had tried to stand not for show, but out of respect. Even when respect had not been offered to her. Danielle glanced up, her eyes sweeping the room. She didn't need to shout or plead. The silence was louder than any argument. "Now you all know," she said softly. "Now you see." Her words settled over the room like snow, soft, undeniable, permanent. In the back, Jenna's voice, quiet, breathless, came through the stream. "This isn't about traffic tickets. This is about what we choose to see, and what we choose to ignore." The room remained still, but something fundamental had changed. The woman who had entered this courtroom unseen, unheard, now held every eye. Not because she demanded it, but because dignity, when it reveals itself, has gravity. And in that moment, the whole world felt it. The courtroom hadn't moved in what felt like hours. But when Maya was quietly asked if she needed a break, she nodded just once and slowly let herself be helped to the hallway. Danielle walked beside her, hand on her elbow, eyes still scanning the crowd as if unsure whether to fear or trust what had just shifted. Outside, the air hit different, cooler, more awake. The noise of the street beyond the courthouse steps hummed back into focus, the honk of a passing truck, the low murmur of gathered reporters, the buzz of someone's phone vibrating on a bench. And then Jenna's phone lit up again. A message. No name, just, "She once saved General Olivia Vaughn's life in Iraq. Check it." Jenna's eyebrows lifted. She blinked, reread the message twice, then shot a glance toward the courtroom door. The live stream had already blown past 70,000 viewers. And now this. She started typing fast, searching, scrolling, cross-referencing. And then she froze. Because there it was, an article from 2010. A piece buried in a military archive. Headline: Field Medic Saves General During Mosul Ambush. A grainy photo showed a younger Olivia Vaughn, blood on her vest, being carried on a stretcher by a woman with eyes sharp as steel and a tourniquet wrapped around one arm. The woman was Maya Rollins. Meanwhile, outside the front gates of the courthouse, a black SUV had pulled up. And from it stepped someone few expected to ever see at a civilian hearing. General Olivia Vaughn. No fanfare, no entourage, just her in uniform. Gray at the temples, back straight, medals displayed but not flaunted. She didn't walk toward the courtroom doors. She stood just outside the perimeter, waiting, watching. Within seconds, the press descended. "General Vaughn, are you here because of the Maya Rollins case? Do you have a statement to make? Were you really saved by this woman?" Cameras flashed. Microphones leaned in. The general didn't hesitate. "I'm not here to interfere," she said firmly. "I'm here because I owe my life to the woman inside that building." A pause, then her voice calm but cutting. "I bled out in the sand while mortars rained down. Everyone thought I wouldn't make it. But Maya Rollins didn't ask for permission to help me. She crawled through enemy fire. She tied off my wounds. She stayed with me while everyone else was ordered to pull back." Another pause. "And today, I find out she's being treated like she doesn't matter, like she's just another file on a desk. No, I will not stay silent while justice forgets her." That clip was caught on 3 different cameras. It hit the internet before she even stepped back into her SUV. By the time she pulled away, the story had already gone viral. Inside, a clerk rushed to Judge Brooks, who sat behind the bench reviewing her notes. He handed her an iPad, whispered something. The judge took the device, squinted, and hit play. There in full HD was General Vaughn's face. Her words, her presence, her fury. Elena Brooks didn't say a word, but her lips tightened. Her jaw set. And for the first time since she'd taken the bench that morning, her hand began to tremble just slightly as she lowered the tablet. Back near the hallway, Maya stood quietly by a window, her back to the courtroom. She hadn't seen the interview, hadn't heard the words, but something had shifted in the air again. She could feel it. Deputy Rourke walked up beside her. His stance, so stiff and impersonal before now, carried the stillness of someone unsure of himself for the first time in years. He didn't speak at first, just looked out the same window. Then softly, "You were in Mosul, 2010. Maya glanced at him. "Yeah, I was there too. I didn't know. I didn't recognize you." Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. Rourke nodded to himself. Then looked at her again, really looked. Not like a defendant. Not like a name on a docket. But like someone worthy of salute. "If you ever need anything," he said, voice low but clear, "you just ask." He didn't wait for a response. Just stepped back, gave her space. Danielle leaned in, whispered, "You okay?" Maya gave a faint smile. "I'm still standing. That's enough for now." And for the first time all day, she let herself rest against the window frame. She didn't look weak. She looked like someone who had walked through fire more than once and come out holding something no one could take. Outside, the world was watching. Inside, the truth was finally being heard. No one told them to rise. There wasn't a call for silence, no anthem playing in the background, no authority figure demanding attention. And yet something in that courtroom had shifted. Not loud, not sudden, but deep. Like a current changing direction under still water. Maya sat still, her left hand gently pressed on her lap, her right still trembling slightly from the fall earlier. Her hair clung to the side of her face, but she didn't reach up to fix it. Her eyes remained lowered, not in shame, but in the kind of restraint worn by someone too used to being misjudged. The first to stand was a man seated in the 3rd row, mid-30s, built like someone who used to be stronger. His movements were stiff, like each joint remembered a time when it had taken damage. He stepped into the center of the courtroom, cleared his throat, and removed his cap. I was 19, he said. She held pressure on my leg for 3 hours in Fallujah. I remember the way her voice cut through the noise. She talked about sweet potato pie and New Orleans jazz. She made it feel like I had something to live for. She didn't know my name then. That's okay. I never forgot hers. No one applauded. No one moved. But something rippled through the room. A shift. Reverent. Private. A young woman stood next. Blonde. Maybe late 20s. Her hands shook as she gripped the rail in front of her. I was a nursing student in Mosul, she whispered. I froze once during a mass casualty drill. Everyone else moved on. She stayed. She said, "You can't save everyone, but if you save one, you're not useless." I've been saving people ever since. She sat back down quickly, wiping her face. Jenna didn't speak at all. She quietly reached over and placed her phone on the bench beside her camera, still rolling but forgotten. Then she stood up, hands behind her back, shoulders squared. One by one, others rose. A postal worker, an elderly woman gripping the handles of her walker, a teenage boy in a school uniform, each face different, each reason silent, but each body rising slowly, deliberately. No one looked at each other. They weren't mimicking a trend. They were answering something inside themselves. Deputy Rourke stood last. He remained by the wall for a moment longer, unmoving, watching, processing. Then he reached to his chest, unclipped his nameplate, and walked to the front of the courtroom. He placed it on the judge's bench, gently, as if it were made of something sacred. Then returned to his post, but this time with his head slightly bowed. Maya looked around. Her breath came uneven now. She wasn't trying to hold back tears, but her body did it for her. Out of habit, out of training, out of old wounds stitched too tight. Danielle stepped forward and knelt beside her, whispering, "You don't have to carry it alone anymore." Maya didn't speak. She couldn't. But her fingers reached for her sisters, held them tightly. Then came the unexpected sound of heels against the floor. Elena Brooks, still robed in black, descended from her bench. For a moment, the room froze in a different kind of silence, an anticipation wrapped in uncertainty. Judge Brooks didn't speak as she walked, her expression unreadable. She reached Maya, paused in front of her, and removed her robe, folded it carefully over her arm and laid it on the edge of the wooden railing. Then she turned back toward Maya, not as a judge, but as a woman stripped of power and pretense. Her voice, when it came, was steady, but soft. I've spent years believing justice meant control, discipline, cold logic. Today, I saw something else. She looked around the room at the standing strangers, at Deputy Rourke, at Jenna, at Danielle. I saw honor not written in medals, but in the quiet courage of those who remember. She looked back at Maya. And I saw a woman who stood for others long before anyone thought to stand for her. The room was still, breath held, not in fear, not in awe, but in deep, raw respect. Judge Brooks didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't extend a hand or kneel or speak grand words. She simply stepped forward just enough that her shadow touched Maya's feet and bowed her head. That was all. Maya finally exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for years. And as she looked around the room, a room once meant to sentence her, contain her, reduce her, she saw something else. Not just people standing. She saw a room that had remembered its humanity. And for the first time in that long, quiet morning, she allowed herself the smallest smile. Not because they saw her now, but because at last they understood. The clip didn't just go viral, it detonated. By nightfall, it had spread across every major news outlet, shared in morning briefings and Sunday sermons, reposted by veterans groups and disability advocates, stitched with commentary by influencers and scholars alike. One moment, it was just courtroom footage from a local courthouse. Hours later, it was the image America didn't know it needed to see: a decorated veteran collapsed on the courtroom floor, her bronze star spinning into silence, and then a room standing one by one. But Maya Rollins didn't speak. She didn't appear on the morning shows. She didn't take phone calls from major anchors or respond to invitations from talk show producers. Her phone, overwhelmed with messages, remained off for days. When a reporter camped outside her small brick home asked if she had anything to say to the country, Maya simply replied through a closed door, "I already did." It was Danielle who stepped forward first. She appeared on a local radio station with a quiet conviction that startled even the host. "My sister isn't seeking fame. She's never wanted the spotlight. But justice, real justice, doesn't happen in silence. It needs light. And maybe for once this light found the right person. That interview, simple and short, went viral too. Some began calling Maya the quiet general. Others wrote articles labeling her a modern symbol of dignity. A congressional committee even released a public statement within 72 hours. This courtroom incident has illuminated urgent gaps in how our justice system treats disabled veterans. It cannot be ignored. They called it the Rawlins moment. And suddenly there was a draft bill, an actual legislative proposal designed to enforce greater protections for disabled veterans in legal proceedings. A section of it was titled, "Standing Isn't Always Strength." The committee requested Maya's input, not as a witness, as a consultant. They wanted her voice on record. The morning the letter arrived, Maya didn't say much. She read it quietly in her kitchen while her mother stirred oatmeal, and Danielle sat nearby holding her mug too tightly. After a long pause, Maya folded the letter, slid it into her lap, and finally spoke. "I'll go," she said, but not for recognition, and not for their applause. Danielle looked at her sister, unsure. Then for what? Maya met her eyes. "Because someone else will sit in that same courtroom someday, and they deserve better than I got." The day Maya arrived in Washington, the steps of the Capitol were lined not with journalists, but with people in uniform. Some old, some young, some in wheelchairs, some with service dogs, some who had stood once like her and fallen. Many held signs that said nothing more than her name. Inside the committee room, they asked if she'd like a podium. She declined. Instead, she stood slowly from her seat, leaning slightly on her cane. She looked at each member of the panel, men and women in suits holding pens and pretending not to be moved. Then, in a voice calm but undeniable, she said, "I don't speak today to be praised. I'm not here so you can call me a hero on paper. I stand before you because I was once picked up by strangers, by nurses, by a system that hadn't yet failed me. I stand because someone else gave me the strength to." She paused. Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. "So if we want to build a justice system that honors sacrifice, it has to do more than read citations. It has to look people in the eye, and sometimes it has to sit down and listen." There were no camera flashes, no roaring applause, just the sound of pens stopping mid-sentence. Later, a senator approached her and offered a handshake. "Thank you for your service." Maya nodded once, then replied, "Don't thank me. Just do better." She walked away before he could respond. That evening, as the committee closed with unanimous approval for the bill's next stage, Maya returned home to find a handwritten letter tucked in her door. It read, "I watched from my living room. My daughter is in a wheelchair. She thinks you're the strongest person she's ever seen. Thank you for standing up for those who can't." Maya didn't smile, but she held the letter for a long time, and in the quiet of her room that night, she sat down beside her uniform, tucked away for years in the back of her closet, and finally allowed herself to touch the folded sleeve, not out of pride, but out of peace, because the world had finally heard her silence. It was just past noon when Maya Rawlins stepped onto the stage. No spotlight followed her. No orchestra played. No voice boomed through speakers to announce her name. The National Memorial Field stood quiet, only the wind moved, rustling the flags that lined the edge of the open-air ceremony. It was a day meant for remembering, not performing, and still every eye followed her. Maya walked slowly, one step at a time, the soft click of her cane against the wood sounding louder than any applause. Her black suit fit clean and simple, her hair pulled back in a low bun. She didn't wear her medal. She didn't wear anything that told you she was somebody. But by the time she reached the center of the platform, no one had any doubt she was. She stood for a moment looking out. Rows of veterans, families, nurses, children in scout uniforms, mothers holding folded flags close to their chests, senators, generals, journalists with cameras that for once weren't clicking. Even the president was there, seated quietly in the second row. But Maya didn't acknowledge any of them. Her gaze wandered past the rows into the quiet trees beyond, and then she spoke. "I'm not standing here because I'm strong," she said. Her voice was even but not rehearsed. It felt like she was speaking to the space between them, not to the microphones. "I'm not standing because I'm brave or because I want to be thanked. I'm standing because I still can, and because too many others can't." A hush settled over the crowd, heavy, real, not forced. No one moved. She lowered her eyes, gathering herself, not from nerves but from weight. I served with people who didn't make it home, and I carry them with me not as stories, not as medals, but as breaths I still get to take. I don't want to be their voice. I want to be the silence they never got to leave behind. She paused, and in that pause, the entire field seemed to lean forward. I don't want to be remembered for collapsing in a courtroom. If I'm remembered at all, let it be for choosing to stand. Not because someone told me to, but because I knew someone else might need to see it done. She turned slightly, her eyes scanning the crowd again, not searching, but letting them in. I am not your symbol. I am not your headline. I'm just someone who got back up. And I don't think that makes me special. I think it makes me responsible. There was no cue for applause, and no one offered any. Instead, in absolute quiet, the first man in the front row rose to his feet and placed his hand over his heart. Then a woman in uniform. Then a child. Then, row by row, as if choreographed by something ancient and invisible, the crowd followed suit. They stood, silently, hand over heart. No national anthem played, no orders were given, and yet something had shifted. It wasn't patriotism, it wasn't grief, it was presence, and Maya saw it. She looked down once, then nodded slowly as if to say, "That's enough. I don't ask you to clap, I don't ask you to cheer," she said, "but I will ask you this. Don't sit down when someone else is trying to rise." She took one last look at the flags now still in the wind. Stand up not to prove who you are. Stand up to remember that you still are. Then she stepped back. No music played, no one moved until she left the stage. And in that silence, something far louder than applause echoed across the nation. They didn't call it a revolution. They called it a revision, quiet, almost bureaucratic. But to those who had been watching closely, especially the ones who had stood up with her, it was clear something had shifted. Congress passed the bill 3 weeks after Maya's speech, unanimously. No debates dragged on. No party lines were drawn. Just one page, simple, clear, and overdue. It was called the Rawlins Judicial Accommodation Act, but people everywhere just started calling it Maya's Law. The law prohibited judges from ordering a disabled defendant to stand during court proceedings unless a certified medical evaluation supported their ability to do so safely. It required judicial officers to undergo annual training in trauma-informed protocol, and it introduced a line that many called the Maya Clause: dignity is not earned. It is presumed. Maya didn't attend the signing. She didn't appear in interviews. She didn't make statements. She didn't post anything online. The morning the law passed, she was at the local rec center organizing medical kits for the first aid class. She had started quietly, just 10 people folding chairs, a whiteboard that squeaked when she wrote on it. She taught the way she lived, no fanfare, no speeches, just firm, calm instructions and the occasional quiet story that slipped through when she thought no one was paying too much attention. It was Danielle who told the rest of the world. She started writing a memoir, not hers, but her sister's. She called it The One Who Stood Not to Prove, but to Refuse Leaving Anyone Behind. She wrote late into the nights long after Maya had gone to sleep. She interviewed veterans Maya had saved, the nurses who still remembered her hands, and even the courtroom bailiff who had once believed silence was his safest weapon, until he saw where silence had brought them. Danielle interviewed Judge Elena Brooks too. By then the judge had retired. No press conference, no official statement, just a quietly filed resignation and a letter handwritten and trembling delivered in a plain envelope to Maya's home. In it, Elena apologized, not for the law, not for the courtroom, but for forgetting to see the human being in front of her. Maya read it once, then placed it in a drawer with her other unopened medals. She never replied, except for a single note sent weeks later. "I forgave you the moment you stood." She didn't explain it. She never did. And maybe that's what made it resonate more than anything else. She went on teaching her first aid class every week. She helped a young single mother get certified to work in emergency response. She taught an elderly man how to stop bleeding with a torn shirt and 2 fingers. She smiled at babies in strollers. She helped the mailman who tripped on her front step. She lived. And no, she didn't accept any more medals. Not because she was bitter, but because she believed in something quieter. Recognition, she once whispered to Danielle, should never be louder than the act itself. And so Maya's Law lived on, not as a symbol, but as a reminder that standing isn't always about rising to be seen. Sometimes it's about refusing to let someone else fall. The letter came folded twice, written in purple crayon, and sealed with a sticker shaped like a gold star. It came from next door from Lily, the 7-year-old, who always waved shyly at Maya from behind the garden gate. Inside was a second-grade essay titled, "Who I Want to Be." Maya read it slowly, her thumb brushing over the smudged words. "I want to stand like Miss Maya." She didn't yell or fight, but everybody listened. I think standing doesn't mean being tall. It means being right. The corners of Maya's mouth lifted, not into the kind of smile you give out of politeness, but into something gentler, a quiet kind of warmth that settled behind her eyes. It was the first time in a long while she looked at something and felt not the weight of the past, but the grace of now. Danielle sat beside her on the porch, 2 mugs of chamomile in her hands. She handed one over without a word, then leaned her head gently on Maya's shoulder. "You were never trying to be remembered," Danielle whispered, voice steady. "But you made it impossible for anyone to forget." Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The late afternoon light filtered through the porch railing, casting long, soft shadows on the floorboards. One beam fell across the small table between them where Maya had left the bronze star, not in a case, not framed, just resting on the wood, like it belonged to the sun. For years it had been locked away. For years she had tried to forget the moments behind that metal, the screams, the smell of metal and dust, the hands she couldn't save. But now it wasn't about pride, it was about clarity. Across the street, Lily's voice echoed through the open window as she read her essay to her mom. Maya heard her say, "Even if you're scared, standing means you do it anyway." Maya took a sip of tea, slow and thoughtful. There was something about a child's words, how they cut through the noise, how they held no pretense. The world had tried to define her with headlines and hashtags. They called her a hero, a symbol, a veteran, a victim, a survivor. But this little girl had seen her not as a role, but as a reminder. Not someone on a pedestal, but someone who simply did what was right, quietly, without asking for permission. Danielle turned slightly. "You ever regret it? Not saying more, not telling your story out loud." Maya looked ahead at the horizon where the trees swayed gently in the breeze. "I didn't need to," she said softly. "They listened when I stood." And that was the truth of it. Sometimes the loudest change comes from the silence that refuses to sit back down. Sometimes legacy isn't carved into marble or written into law. Sometimes it slips into second-grade notebooks and echoes across front porches, tucked between the lines of ordinary days. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gentle shades of gold and rose, Maya leaned back in her chair. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Inside the bronze star stayed exactly where she left it, not polished, not displayed. Just present. Just enough. And when the final voice came to close the story, it wasn't with music or applause. Just these simple words. She stood, and the world remembered what standing really means. Before you go, take a moment to reflect on what this story truly meant. It wasn't just about a courtroom or a medal. It was about the quiet kind of strength, the kind that doesn't ask to be seen, but can't be ignored. Maya didn't stand to prove anything. She stood because someone once lifted her. And now, she lifts us all. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Mr. Mac's Stories for more powerful, unforgettable journeys like this one. Your support is what fuels our team. Every click, every share, every kind comment gives us the strength to keep creating the stories that matter. Here at Mr. Mac's Stories, we don't just tell stories. We remind the world of what it should never forget. See you in the next story.